Moderating our panel this morning is Mr. Scott Lewis. Pleased to welcome you back again, Scott. Scott is President and CEO of PS Partnerships, who works to help technology firms develop and execute business strategies and create meaningful relationships and partnerships with the SI community. He's got over 25 years experience in the public sector, so I'm sure that he'll be able to lead us in a lively discussion this morning. Thank you so much, Scott, and I'll turn the podium over to you.
Thank you. The 25 years, I just kind of leave it on the bio. We don't want that to grow at all. Anyway, thank you for coming today, and thank Rita for allowing me to moderate this great panel. Today we're going to kick it off with three important folks in the government space who some of you seem to know very well already. We're going to do introductions and let them speak for 10 minutes or so, their opening lines as to where they are and what they see within their world. I'll do some follow-up Q&A, and we're going to open it up to the crowd here, and we should end no later than 10:30, if not a little bit earlier on that. So hopefully you can get engaged and ask some questions about what you see happening and how it might be affecting your business. The audience here that we marketed this to is really the systems integration community. So it's mostly the folks out in the audience here are ones who offer solutions versus just trying to sell a technology. There may be some technology companies out here, but in general, that's what the audience was, the invitation was focused on. So that adds a little bit different component, I think, when we're looking at solving business problems versus just trying to sell technologies. With sequestration and data center consolidation, I think a lot of this is changing the way business is done in government. And in talking to the speakers ahead of time, I think they have a lot to say around that, too. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and I'll kind of go from my left to the right here, and we'll start with Jim Flanagan. Jim Flanagan is Director of Office of Information Services at Nuclear Regulatory Commission. He started that, I guess, in August of 2012. He's been doing this for over 28 years. He comes to NRC from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, where he served as a Chief Technology Officer. So give me a round of applause for Jim, please. Go ahead and open your dialogue, Jim.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today and give you a little profile of our environment. As a small agency, we have a singular mission. We're focused on the safety and security associated with the nuclear fleet of reactors that are operating in the United States. So that's our core mission. As far as IT is concerned, we're probably about, I would say, less integrated than I would like at this point in time. We have the commission regulatory function, that is the driving point for us. So content management, database functions, things of that nature are key to our efforts. We're working hard this year to put forth a cloud initiative. We already have a small presence in the cloud, but it is mostly driven by singular systems, HR, finance, things of that nature. We're now looking for an opportunity to take our 7 data centers, shift them down to probably a single data center, maybe 2 at the outside, or 1 at a smaller facility, and move the majority of our production components to the cloud. Struggling a little bit in that area. We've done a lot of research associated with recent RFPs and statements of work that have been out there. We're trying to find the right combination that works for us. We're also trying to find a combination that allows industry to do what it does best, and that is provide us with a solution that is geared on our results-driven environment and not push us into trying to define in great detail all of the typical RFP elements that we might look into. That's a little bit of a struggle. Our natural inclination is try to help you in such a way that we put anchors on both your legs and both your arms and then expect you to be agile in the course of the process. We're trying to do exactly the opposite with this effort. So it's been a little bit of a struggle for our agency to take a fresh view of it, but we are doing a decent job of it, I think, at this point in time as we get into the early development process. And we're really trying to give industry an opportunity to come back to us with a unique solution that will provide us with a homogeneous environment, probably a little bit of local cloud for some things. We just don't feel comfortable sourcing to the broader cloud environment at this point in time. The majority of our systems then going to this new cloud solution, and then a few lingering elements that are either in the area of the CFO and under the CFO Act as opposed to the CIO control. Those will probably linger in their environment for a while. The challenge then is to step back a little bit and provide that same capability in a way that will allow us to source across those three environments and do it flexibly and to do it in a way that will provide consistency and a simplified interface for our folks. So that's the dilemma that we're facing at the moment, and we expect that it's not uncommon, and it's something that both industry and the feds have dealt with in quite a while. It's also given us insight into some of the, I'm hesitant to call them conflicts, but let's just say anomalies in the security space and the sort of seeming conflict between that, the driver in that space to push you towards more and more insertion of sensors and other capabilities into your own environment, and the fact that those standards have not been promulgated to the commercial cloud at this point in time. So that's our story, and I think we, as I said, I think we find ourselves pretty much at the same position as most agencies as far as our desire to move, but facing some of the challenges that you're probably more than familiar with.
Thanks, Jim. Next person on our panel here is Kirit Amin. He's Deputy CIO and Chief Technology Officer at Department of Commerce. Previously positioned, he was Chief Technology Innovation Officer at HUD. And prior to that, he also supported U.S. Department of State. Over 30 years of dealing in this market on management, leadership, engineering, design, and implementing some pretty large systems integration projects. So, Mr. Amin?
Good morning. Bear with me, I've been with Department of Commerce for only 4 months and counting. However, having said that, most of the challenges don't differ much depending on which department you are in the federal government. I don't know how many of you know the landscape of the Commerce Department. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, next to me, Ed is sitting here, and he's from DHS. We all know how diverse, mission-based DHS is. I would say next to DHS, probably Commerce is the next one, is very diverse, very big, and very complex. One would ask, what does census have to do with what it does versus NOAA, or for that matter, Patent and Trademark Office or NIST, and not to mention our other economic and international trade bureaus. But having said that, I was kind of really in awe when we have our monthly Commerce CIO Council meeting, chaired by the CIO and myself. And how many CIOs are at the table? Anybody in this room? I like it interactive, guys. Okay. How many do you think in the CIO Council at Commerce, in addition to myself and the CIO? 17. Close. No, not that many. Yeah, so we got major bureaus and agencies within the Commerce, 12, okay, with very diverse missions, as I say, very complex, okay? And to work with that environment has its own challenges, okay? But I always say this, challenges, as Ed says, means opportunities, right? Okay? But the challenges come now, as we all know currently, from political, financial, and other angles that we have to deal with, not to mention HR and acquisitions, in addition to the technology and what one wouldn't say is our prime mission from a CIO or a CTO standpoint is technology. And I'm going to go on a limb again saying technology is the easy part from what we have to do. It's the other aspects that we deal with currently which make it very, very difficult for us. So what is happening with us is right now, currently we are responding, I don't know how many of you know, the current data call that has come from OMB and how they have now reformatted the portfolio stat. And they say, by the way, they come out about 4 weeks ago and they say, by the way, we want it by mid-April, your strategic plan, which addresses basically your enterprise architecture roadmap, your data center consolidation, your digital strategy, your e-government, your security, all tied into your capital planning and investment control. That's by itself on a department like Commerce is a tall order. Okay? But, okay, here is OMB saying this in a way I sometimes scratch my head, and that's why I don't have any hair, I suppose. But at the same time, I think for a change, OMB is onto something that has teeth in it, I think. Okay? So what is happening now is that as a result of that, we, at Commerce and the CIO Council of Commerce are really taking a serious look at all this and say, okay, how are we collectively going to address this going forward, right? So we are drafting the strategic plan to submit and basically formatting in near term, mid-term, and long-term. Okay? Near term we are defining as 12 to 15 months, mid-term 1 to 3 years, and long-term 3 to 5 years. Okay? So now you go and say, okay, between now and in the next 5 years, how is commerce going to evolve into all these different areas that we are basically addressing and will have to do. Okay? Currently, we are planning certain initiatives are underway right now and being planned as we speak. Web hosting. Okay, we are going enterprise-wide. Okay, that's a challenge in itself, but I think we are moving ahead very aggressively. We have certain timelines that we want to achieve in getting a consolidated web hosting in place. Probably see an RFP coming out in not too long a time for that. Okay. Next thing we are looking at, of course, which is the low-hanging fruit again, so is web hosting, is email to the cloud. Okay, we have put some timelines that before fiscal year 14 is out, all of commerce will be in cloud email. Okay, and just having said that, you have no idea how many emails we have currently. Next thing we are addressing also is, and today's topic is the data center consolidation. Having said that, that's not an easy task at Commerce, simply because of our missions and how we are currently positioned. Next thing is, of course, the digital strategy. And that's an ongoing thing, as you very well know. They are asking us to put out some APIs, some mobile apps. We are aggressively working on that. And I think we have some tremendous opportunities to put some of this stuff out across some of our bureaus. Okay? For example, wouldn't it be powerful to use census data with the weather data? Okay? Clear implications that somebody could use that for whatever purpose they might want to do. Okay? So these are very powerful databases we have that could be used on the APIs and on the digital apps. And we are looking at a lot of this. Of course, then the e-government part of it. And of course, the major part of this now is the security. Okay? Once we go to this diverse data consolidation, cloud, it's going to be all over the place. How is it going to work with security as a predominant aspect that we have to address? I mean, we have seen lately how state-sponsored others are trying to hack into our systems. And how do we protect this massive data that we have? So having said that, these are really complex number of initiatives we are working on and will be as we move forward. And I'm going to go out and say, this cannot be done by us, government only, and it is this public-private partnership that we will have to work with together to really address some of these oncoming challenges that we have. And the guiding principles basically to achieve all this that I personally believe, and I'm basically putting it into our strategic plan, is really collaboration, and that's collaboration within ourselves, with the private sector, and across agencies, okay? Effectiveness, we can't just go and say, hey, we're going to collaborate. It has to be very effective. It has to have an enterprise value. Everything we are looking at now under these guys is from an enterprise standpoint. And also has to then, at the end of the day, deliver the service that the missions are signed up to do. Okay? So that, I hope, has given you a very high-level landscape of Department of Commerce and the challenges that we face.
Thank you. Now, I had a little mistake there. Give Kirit a round of applause. I didn't ask that when I introduced him. Got to feel welcome. Ed Rhyne. He's the Program Manager for Homeland Security, Advanced Research Projects Agency, working within the Cybersecurity Division in the Science and Technology Directorate. He manages multiple efforts supporting national and regional level cyber competitions as well as cyber education programs. For the past 20 years, he's been involved in systems engineering and program management in a variety of areas, especially connected to the cyber side. So a round of applause for Ed, please.
Thanks. So I am from the Science and Technology Directorate of DHS, and as such, we are the R&D arm for the department. And as Kirit said, it's a very diverse department. So as the R&D arm for the department, it extends also into the Homeland Security enterprise. So we've changed that language in the past several years. So that really incorporates a lot more than just the department, which is already diverse. You know, when you think about the mission space of FEMA versus CBP versus even the Coast Guard, and then look at U.S. CERT, who are protecting all of the .gov space and the civilian networks, it's an enormous challenge. So to help that, the Cybersecurity Division, looking at R&D programs, we've kind of divided our portfolio into three areas. We're protecting the people, the systems, and the infrastructure. Underlying all that, we have research infrastructure, you know, because there's a lot of outcry from the community, the development community, to look at things like, you know, we need data to show that our intrusion prevention systems actually work. How do you get data? Well, we have the Predict repository for that, that you can sign up and get, you know, access to that with a lot of controls on it. We also have the Deter testbed that we fund that gives people a virtual playground effectively to, again, test their wares. Then we also have a big push in transition to practice. And this is a big problem. Transitioning technologies is not easy. You know, Kirit said that the technology generally is fairly easy, and I agree with that. You know, the problem is not the technology development. You know, we can put a lot of resources on that. We have very bright, intelligent people. The problem really does get down to getting people to give it a try, you know, policies. Looking at, you know, convincing somebody that controls their network and says, you know, hey, I have to keep this network up 100% of the time, or else I get, you know, downgraded, let's say. How am I going to afford to put in something new that's untried? You know, yeah, you've tested it in an operational test environment, but it's not going to work on my system. You know, you need to convince people of this, and that's a challenge. So we have had some successes. We've actually started the DNS security protocol about 11 years ago, and now it's about 70% deployed within the government. Yesterday, Google finally formally announced that their public DNS is now validating DNS, which is a huge success for DNSSEC. We also fund competitions because workforce is a huge problem. And I think everybody has been reading the news and knowing that there's a workforce shortage across the government. And, you know, the problem isn't the schools aren't turning out bright people. It's a lot of the times we don't have the right people with the right skills and the practical experience. So we look at competitions as a way to draw out the practical side of the education process, as well as some technology transition. You know, so if we can get people to be familiar with the new technologies that are coming out before they even enter the workforce, they can start to drive change from within early on. And then we don't have problems of when Comcast starts turning on validation on DNSSEC that large sections of the .gov space fall off because somebody did their key roller poorly. Looking at systems, and getting into today's topic, data center consolidation. DHS has gone from, I think, around 46 data centers down to 5. Now, S&T wasn't really a part of that, but we look at that effort and say, this is great. There's a lot of challenges, though, which turns into opportunities. So, the government in the switch to, cloud computing, let's say, has some different challenges from industry. Specifically, how do you deal with PII, personal identifying information? This is not something that the industrial or industry is going to necessarily have the same concerns that government does. So, FedRAMP is going to try to attack this from the server side. What about the endpoints? As soon as somebody leaves the office with their laptop and they don't connect through the VPN, the policies that are set forth in CIO shop are not being used. So, what have you just done to your network when you connect into your network with your laptop? When you get back to the office. Big concern. So within S&T, we're looking at trying to push the security perimeter down to the endpoints, but then also look at more effective ways of using technology and looking at the private-public partnerships and say, does the government really need to run networks if all we're doing is running encrypted traffic? The big telework policies, where we're pushing people to telework. Well, you're working from home, you're on a non-controlled network, but you're pushing encrypted traffic. So does the government really need to run internal networks for classified information? It's a good question. Can we safely say that we can run all of our data over public networks through our ISPs that run networks very efficiently and know that the data is not being compromised? Well, that turns into an auditing problem or a forensics problem. When you start talking about cloud computing, how do you know that if you need to clear your systems of all PII and you have data stored on various computers throughout the country, throughout the world even, that you've collected all this information? Cloud forensics is a big challenge. It turns into an opportunity for us. So without getting into too much of our details and taking too much time, we're here to answer your questions. So I'll end there.
Thanks. Thank you. Let me kind of start off with the big topic of the day, sequestration. From a SI perspective, in talking to your agency, how has sequestration helped, hurt, or changed the way you're going to be going to market within those areas over the next year or so? Is it forcing you to make decisions that actually will save money, to make decisions of investing wisely versus just investing? But around the theme of data center consolidation and the federal data center, how or has it not sequestration affected you in the IT perspective of things around data center? Jim?
At our agency, it's actually had a relatively benign effect. The nature of our agency is one where we are fee-based, and so we have a little more flexibility on how to implement sequestration than most agencies might have. We are continuing to pursue our cloud strategy as a result of that, and we are seeing some impacts and some reprioritization that actually is supporting the move to cloud as a result of sequestration impacts in other areas. But by and large, we've been fortunate and able to skate past that major concern. So, Kirit?
Yeah, sequestration. The problem with the sequestration is that, as we all very well know, first of all, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? We didn't really have time to plan for this. It wasn't like sequestration is coming a year from now and we can put certain plans in place. So we had to kind of adjust as we went along. And I think we're going to be able to, at Commerce, get through this one without much of an impact. Okay? Impact in the sense of immediate impact. Okay? But if sequestration, as we all know, is not a one-time issue, okay, if it's there to stay, some of the things that we are getting around this fiscal year by addressing those is delay some of the things. Case in example, I froze all my hiring, right? That's shooting myself in the foot because on one hand, I don't have enough personnel or qualified personnel, but I don't have much of a choice right now to say, okay, 6 months I delay hiring, so that expense is saved, right? The other things we are delaying is some of the refresh, for example, on the hardware, right? But these are all steps taken to address the immediate impacts, but that is being pushing down the road. Okay? If you're going to push it down the road and if it's going to stay, obviously we'll have to plan and the impacts could be different. However, having said that, of course, some of the initiatives that I just said are going to lead us to some savings, right? But again, those savings are going to come as we implement along the way these consolidations and web-based approach, right? So currently, I think we are getting by, if you will, but it is also addressing all this and how we do this is taking away, really, it's an opportunity cost, the way I see it, away from us, away from what our primary mission is and what we need to do and focus on, okay? Because we have to focus on some of these things and address them as we are going ahead, right? And the other aspect there is that when I go and if people now know the uncertainty and they said, are we going to be furloughed, right? And as it is, lots of people that I'm trying to light fires on the government side and say, hey, we need to perform at higher levels, really come out and tell us, hey, hold your horses here. We haven't been paid raises for 3 years, our pay is frozen. Now we might be looking at furloughs. What's our career and what's our future here? So under those circumstances, really to excel and raise the bar and what we have to do under this, I personally believe that budgetary and financial issues are here to stay. Okay. Given a little time, can we reprogram and can we do? Absolutely, I think we can. You know, it's not that there isn't money. I think there is. It's a question of how do you, for example, if I'm consolidating, there is another aspect on the industry side. If I consolidate my service desks, I have current contracts at the other bureaus, right? Now to bring acquisitions into play and say, hey, how do I do this? How do we go about it without being paid or somebody has to take a burden someplace in one area? So there is a lots of adjustments that have to happen across lots of our, outside of the CIO shop, in other words. So we have to bring HR into this place. For example, we just finished consolidating 2 of our smaller bureaus on the service desk, right? The bureaus came and says, hey, by the way, I have these people, what do you want me to do about them? I said, hey, it ain't my problem. Oh, yes, it is. It's all of our problem. Bring HR into this big, and maybe need to repurpose these people, right? And train them into doing different tasks than what they were doing. Oh, by the way, but you don't have money for training. I'm sorry. You don't have the money. We cut that. So it's if you look at that complex issue we are dealing with right now as to how we go about addressing all these issues is really are the challenges that we face. But right now, I would say immediate effects, we probably can ride this wave. But going forward, it's still lots of, as we all know, unanswered questions here from a political end and what the Hill is going to do.
And is it affecting security development at all on your side?
Well, it is. Okay, that's a good question. In fact, I'm going to air this dirty laundry here. But one of the things that the CIO Council came back at us is we are pushing the continuous monitoring. Guys, this is top of the priority right now. Okay, we got to protect. Okay, all of them came and says, wait a minute. Only you're saying, taking my money away, doing this, how do you want us to now do also this, right? And basically we came back saying, we all have the same challenges, but as far as continuous monitoring goes, it's cost of doing business, okay? Find a way. We can do it. We're going to do it. Okay. So those are the challenges, right? And on security right now, I agree. I was talking to Ed, because he lives and breathes security. So couple things in there, ECMO, continuous monitoring, PIV implementation. We are talking about telework. Everybody's promoting telework on that other end. But telework has its own challenges. Ed just addressed that. I take my laptop, I do something, I come and plug it back into my network. What the hell are you doing? So on the part of the security we are spending a lot of money right now in what we call inside threat. Awareness and training. Not that any of our people are doing it on purpose, but just because you don't know doesn't mean you are not letting somebody in by doing something that you think is okay. No, it's not. How it leads to phishing. Very simple thing. Are you sending out an email? By the way, there was a social security number on it, okay? This is a PII issue. So there is lots of issues from a security standpoint that we are giving a top priority now. And we are saying, no, that's a must. We must do security and make sure that we are secure. I mean, that's a top priority.
Yeah, so from the S&T point of view, sequestration, as with everybody else up here, is initially not that bad. We have obviously had a hiring freeze and cut on travel, which initially isn't terrible, but ongoing, it's going to become a problem because we can't manage our programs effectively. We're not able to go to site visits. We're not able to have PI meetings and get the collaboration that's really necessary. So, I think the longer this goes on, I think the greater the challenges. It could be fairly, less than ideal.
This is somewhat of a big question, so hopefully don't make it too big here. But kind of fill us in where you are within your data center consolidation plan. How is cloud playing a role in that? And any applications that may be rolling into this cloud or may not? I mean, from HR services, it seems like a lot of it's email and web-based types of things. But comment a little bit about where you are within data center consolidation, how cloud's playing with that, and maybe how FedRAMP is not or may eventually play a role in that. Jim?
I think I gave you a little profile at during the introduction. We really are pursuing the mid-range. We have a small cloud presence among very specialized systems, HR, finance, some security systems. And we're likely to keep a localized presence for some environments that we don't feel comfortable transitioning to the cloud at the moment. We have a few security environments that fall into that category. We do a lot of research, which is currently in concert with DOE. So some of those environments we've had challenges finding comparable locations within the public cloud environment. On the other hand, the majority of our work is basic operational activities, and those can all be looked at as possible elements to be placed into a public cloud environment. That's one of the objectives of our effort, which is going to coalesce in an RFP later this year. We expect to put a cloud RFP out, and our balance right now is to try to find the right combination of security and service levels that will give us the result that we're looking for and provide an opportunity for us to maximize the benefit that we get out of the cloud. There are clearly benefits that we're going to get overall. We have a less than robust disaster recovery and COOP strategy. We know that we can better that in a cloud environment. Our availability is likely to increase substantially in a better monitored, better supported environment. And we gain a lot of flexibility and a lot of capability around the ability to provision quicker and to put more of our systems in an environment where we can add them to robust testing and development environments. So we see a lot of the benefits. The challenge is achieving that and staying within compliance of the federal security requirements. I mean, right now, FedRAMP is rolling. It's not rolling as fast as a consumer of FedRAMP I would like, but it's rolling. And we expect that will be a major component of our effort. We would prefer it if, when we finally get to market, there were more than, say, half a dozen folks who were certified, but that's not likely to take place. The other challenge that we have is the growing focus that is taking place on continuous monitoring and sensor-based technologies. All of that is appropriate, and it's something that we want to pursue, but if you look at the framework that's come out to date, it's pushing you more towards doing that in your own space, and there hasn't really been an accommodation fully for the cloud providers. I anticipate that that will change. As everything else, it will mature. I think that Kirit pointed out that there's been a lot of change in the portfolio stat process and moving that forward. We see the same change on the security side. But as a consumer, just from a purely agency perspective, I'd like a little bit more certainty in that environment so that I don't go down one path and end up being challenged in another space. And then finally, for us, the larger concern is, well, two other concerns. One is, as a relatively modest consumer of cloud resources, for us, we're really on the balancing point between doing it yourself and that being an effective and budgetarily equitable situation, and going to the cloud where all of a sudden now I've got a significant increase in network traffic, a significant increase in other integration effort that I have to put out. That can sometimes shift the balance one way or the other. So we've taken the stand with our commission that this is really not about pure cost savings, it's about a value change, and a value change in what our commission and our agency will get as services, the quality of services, the speed with which we can respond to new requirements, et cetera. So that's our framework. I'm just not certain at the moment that the economies are going to be there in the near term. And then finally, I think we're looking at and are concerned about our exit strategy. We're early in the cycle for us. We're going to be adopting a cloud strategy that's going to entail the majority of our key business offerings. And frankly, I am not comfortable enough that we know all that we need to know to be good consumers of that service. So I remain concerned about what our exit strategy will be, and should we need to deploy it, what will the impact be financially on the agency? We're countering a lot of that by developing a fairly robust business model and using a lot of what OMB has provided around TCO, as well as our own adaptation of that, to really give us a sense for the comparison between our current offerings and the future cloud recommendations that we might get from industry. And we expect to use that also as a driver over time to determine the cost impacts that have occurred, as well as the value impacts that have occurred for the agency. Because ultimately, we're going to have to keep justifying this year over year to make sure that the agency sees the value and, frankly, gets the value out of what they're looking at. Sure.
It's very interesting how we look at things, and sometimes we all know in the industry buzzwords come up and then they fizzle out. I'll kind of turn the clock back about 5-6 years ago when the word cloud started popping up in the federal arena, and said, okay, and you're sitting in the government and saying, okay, is this really another buzzword, or is this going to stick, right? I remember that very well when we started looking at it. Today, I sit back and look back and says, duh, cloud is here. Cloud is to stay. And I guarantee you 5 years from now, if we are again get together and talk about it, what we are talking today, we'll say, why were we discussing that? So, in my opinion, cloud is here to stay. Cloud is the way to go. Okay? But, having said that, as I think Jim covered some of these issues that are underlying before we can go. OMB came and said, yes, you shall go cloud, you will go cloud, and by the way, how are you going to do the FISMA and the security and FedRAMP? FedRAMP is lagging, as just Jim mentioned. Right now, currently, if I'm not mistaken, there is only 2 companies that are compliant. Okay? Lots of large companies, and some of you might be in that mix, are all saying we are targeting this fiscal year to be compliant. We hope that that's the case, because my point is today, although we go cloud, and let's say we sign up with a cloud company and we go, 4 or 5 years from now, does it come down to gotcha? Now where are you going to go? So where is my business savings and my effectiveness and stuff, or am I now into that proprietary or whatever issues we used to face in the past? So how do we go structure this so that 5 years from now we don't have to address the fact that somebody owns me now, or I have no other alternatives, and all of a sudden my savings and others might be now at a question mark, right? Also, when we go, and we all know we're going to have a hybrid kind of an environment, public clouds, private clouds, our own data centers, how is the communications going to flow in a secure manner across these enterprises that we're going to end up with, which is already starting to happen, right? So there is a lots of underlying aspects to this, which on the surface seem simple but are complex, and how we go about addressing them going forward. But having said that, as I said, the initiatives that at Commerce we are following, clearly, cloud is here to stay. And cloud, like I said, will be maybe around for next 4 or 5 years, and discuss and say, it's here now.
So where are you right now in your data center consolidation and cloud strategy specifically? Where are you and where are you going?
We are moving in a phased. Each of our large bureaus are doing within their data center some consolidation themselves. That's one area. We at the headquarters we have 8 bureaus within the headquarters building. We are already built a new data center in the building. I don't know if you know, but Commerce is going through a 15-year modernization. They are revamping the building. The building was built in 1926. It's an old building. Okay, so we are going. The first phase is complete. Okay, and the data center is in that new area. So it is a new data center. It's a state-of-the-art data center. So we are already starting to move into that data center. Having said that, we don't have redundancy. Then it goes back to what Jim just mentioned. In a COOP scenario, how are we going to function, right? Are we better off if there are some cloud-based mission we have that we don't worry about it and we can get to it in a disaster situation? Okay, Commerce building sits, we all know, as far I consider that ground zero. You sit in the Federal Triangle. Okay, guys, we are in ground zero. If the latest movie comes out, it's a scary thought, right? If something like that happens in Washington, we are going to be impacted. And in that scenario, how do you go and say, how are you going to operate? And that we are looking at that too, as to how in that scenario some of the cloud might be our answer. Right? Too early to tell which ones and how we go about it, but at the end of the day, I think cloud is here to stay, and as I said, 5 years from now we'll be saying it's past, and here we are.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so DHS went from 46 roughly data centers down to 5. The vast majority of the department, though, is consolidated down to 2 data centers, which I think is quite good. As far as our cloud transitions, if you will, so we have moved to email as a service. We did that about almost a year ago, I guess, sometime around there. We also have some pilots on desktop as a service, also BYOD and COPE. A lot of the problems that we face are the mobile workforce, the deployable workforce, meaning, if there's an emergency and you need to send people out there quickly, how do you do that with the right infrastructure, the right resources to get their job done? So having a desktop as a service coming off of a cloud, is quite appealing or attractive for that scenario. So looking at different options. I think there's 17 various pilots on BYOD or COPE, for mobile access to various network resources. And again, I think it's just a matter of, how do we implement this intelligently? Do you need to have access to everything that you would have at your desktop if you're on a mobile device? Probably not. Emails, maybe the ability to view things and edit things. You're probably not going to do a lot of creation on your phone. Just a thought.
Yeah, you mentioned mobility. That's probably bubbling to the top of the list, especially within the SI community. They're developing a lot of relationships and solution sets around mobility, and every agency probably has pilots out there. Connect that a little bit about your IT infrastructure and how you see that rolling out over the next few years. Ed, I'll kind of throw it back to you first.
Yeah, so this gets into kind of FedRAMP and SAJAC and TIC, various programs. So SAJAC, I think, is somewhat interesting from a point of view of accelerating the adoption of cloud. So basically putting together use cases. I think mobile definitely falls within that. Whether or not there actually is a SAJAC component to mobile, I don't really know. But looking at the trusted internet connection, from GSA and the managed trusted internet protocol services, basically the commoditized trusted internet connection. These things all roll into it. So I think the biggest problem is once you secure your endpoint, so your BYOD, your COPE device, how do you make sure that you're securely connecting back to your resources? And this is a challenge. But again, I think it's something that's definitely accomplished fairly easily, and it's an opportunity actually for the private sector, to really start to play better with the government. We have the major ISPs, already with the trusted internet connection validation, if you will. Let's expand upon that. If we could move to an architecture where your internal network basically goes away, and everybody, whether you're in your office or teleworking or in a hotel, whatever, you connect the same way. You log in through your VPN, you make sure that that's the only connection you can have within your virtual environment. Then you don't run the risk of having drive-by malware or whatever. Everything's going to be enforced through your policy at your gateway. All your encrypted traffic going over to all your traffic going over to public network is encrypted. So, looking down the road further, this might be an opportunity for a private-public partnership that really saves the government quite a bit of money, not having to run their own internal networks and the resources, the people, the hardware itself. So,
Kirit? Kirit?
Well, mobility, when we talk mobility, we are basically saying it's the end user device, right? Okay. Again, since we are talking data centers today, with the end user device, the issue then is end to end. How am I going to operate here, right? And the changing end to end technology is really very exciting, okay? So what we start with servers. Look at servers, right? We are virtualizing servers to the nth degree right now, because that's really the way to go. And according to Gartner, the virtual machine ratio density is changing, doubling every 18 months. Okay, so that's a huge issue, which would require increased I/O density within the rack, right? So now you're talking about the server technology. If you look at even a few years ago, I could put X number of servers within a rack unit. Today, I can far more. What I just scary to think what is going to be 2 or 3 years down the road as to how much of the servers are in a vertical rack itself. But that also creates the issue about the increased I/O density. Then it comes to the storage aspects of it. Okay, now I've got this massive data. Okay, so now we are looking at, and we are doing some of this in thin provisioning and tiered storage. Okay, again, how does this going to work to get that end user that particular information that they are looking for? And of course, it comes back to the networks. We are living in a virtual world. We are going from 1 gigabyte to 4 gigabytes to 40 gigabytes, 100 gigabyte Ethernets, right? Big pipes. Bandwidth density within the server racks itself is an issue. Then we got the tech, the trusted internet connection. Again, megabits, Mbps is growing, and the quality of service. Again, we're going to rely on the private industry. How will we go about it? On top of that, you talk about cloud and shared services. Emails might be in my public cloud somewhere. My web hosting might be in the public cloud somewhere. How, between public-private, how are we going to flow? And then you, of course, have the CPU, the SAN, the memory benchmarking. And then, of course, the end-user devices under a very secure environment. Again, we have to have security placed into all this, the TIC, the PIV. Again, it comes back to the same thing. So if you look at, and I always say, it's an end-to-end issue. I can have all kinds of mobile devices which are proliferating at a pace that is mind-blowing, and how are we going to get that end-to-end delivery of the services that we are supposed to provide?
Jim, what's your mobile strategy and where you fit in with that at this stage?
Well, we're a outwardly leaning agency. The majority of our staff are focused and, in fact, are resident at nuclear sites around the country, so that we have staff that range from being located in relatively well-served plant environments to individuals who are monitoring construction of new nuclear plants or construction of waste management facilities, as well as waste management facilities themselves. And you can imagine those are not always well served. They're typically in the most isolated portions of the country. So we've gone aggressively mobile. We have about a third of our workforce that has mobility connections. We started out with the basics, just as Kirit and Edward had talked about. We've gone with email and some basic office services to the field. And we've deployed a FSMA-compliant solution, which containerizes the environment. But we've also given our workforce options. So we're deploying right now a combination of BlackBerry, Android, and iPhone technologies to the field, and actually have reaped some benefit where that is concerned. Our price point for Android and iPhone devices is a little bit lower than our price point for BlackBerries. Similarly, we're using that same capability to deploy tablet solutions to these folks. That's providing them with immediate capabilities for video conferencing, which these isolated folks wouldn't have had before. It is providing our inspectors with photography capabilities, which they wouldn't have had before. Now, these are somewhat casual at this point in time, but we expect to integrate them over time into a suite of mobile apps that they can use. The other challenge that we have, and I think the other speakers have brought this out, is reaching back in a secure fashion to enable analytic review of information. Our inspectors are somewhat mired in traditional approaches, paper-based approaches at the moment. We've deployed solutions that look pretty much like the paper that they have. But the real change for those individuals is going to come as we begin to draw on other sources. Most recently, for example, there was an earthquake in Virginia on a fault line which we didn't know about, which frankly, no one else seemed to know about. And it did impact a nuclear site, although fortunately not negatively. Bringing together that kind of information is exactly the kind of thing that our inspectors need to have. And they need to be able to update that information on a regular basis. We talked about, I think Kirit brought up the notion of Commerce's rich suite of databases. And there are a whole slew of agency databases out there that we can tap. We need to become more adept at doing that. We also need to become more adept at being able to research our own experience, past inspections, so that we can look at commonalities across the fleet, whether we're looking at the provider of that electric service or the type of reactor or the type of incident or the type of pump or whatever component we're talking about, we want to be able to see how that component has operated in the past. So all of this is in our current digital government strategy and where we're going. We have about 40 applications that we're pursuing at the moment, and we expect to continue this move towards mobile platforms. And in fact, we expect to take it into the office as well. We are looking at virtualized desktops, but we're also looking at more of an agnostic approach towards desktops. We've currently deployed both Macs and PCs, Macs in a much smaller capacity because many of our applications are limited in their ability to interact with Macs at this point in time. But as our applications become more web-based and become more capable of dealing in these other environments, our goal really is to step away from dictating the type of hardware and software that individuals will use and provide the desktop endpoint with greater flexibility in that area, which of course then goes back to Edward's point about security at the endpoint. As we begin to mash data together in some of these applications, it can take on attributes that were unknown or that we were unaware of. Tracking data directly, as we're doing today, is far easier than tracking a particular mashup of data and understanding the implications of that data in its new form. And so we're spending a lot of time focused in that area as well, trying to get a handle on how to deal with that, how to secure the endpoint, but how to also secure data rather than even securing necessarily the endpoint. If what we send out there we can have confidence is not exposing the agency or exposing the government to any inadvertent data loss, then we have a greater control while retaining the flexibility that we need at the endpoint.
Interesting. O&M cost, as everybody knows, is 70% of the IT budget within different agencies. Talk a little bit about, I'll go back to you, Jim, on this. Talk a little bit about in your budget of O&M, where are the areas that you can improve efficiencies and reduce O&M to at least bring some more dollars to the table for other IT initiatives? Talk a little about that challenge.
Yeah, this is actually a big challenge within our agency. We have basically split our IT spend. About 50% is direct mission and 50% is the IT organization. I've met a couple times with the chairman and members of the commission, and what we're trying to do is to take a broader look at IT spend. It clearly is not benefiting the agency, and it's not providing us with the best outcome if we have opportunities to place money without a common set of priorities and a common theme to the approach that we're using. We want to make sure that we're using the most effective architectures. We want to make sure that we're using the most effective tools. And we want to make sure, frankly, that we're just not basing our budgets on history rather than the benefit that we get out of the agency's spend. In saying that, that is a lofty goal. It plays directly against the kind of tree-hugging aspect that you get within most department budgets, and it requires us to really begin to take a different view of our environment. So we've looked at a number of enterprise contracts to talk to how to improve the O&M situation for us, where we purchase almost all of our commodity work through enterprise agreements. We're expanding that set of enterprise agreements so that we can look beyond our agency. Again, we're fairly small, so we're not going to always get the best price point that we might get using a broader set of vehicles. So we're trying to accommodate those things in place as well as take a fresh look at our own spend. And I think the combination of those will help moderate the focus on O&M. The second piece of it is that we're taking also a fresh look at the actual way that we classify our O&M spend. A lot of the work that we do, we've become settled over the years in the way that we've allocated budgets. We have not looked at the nature of the work, but rather just classified it as O&M because it was simpler. But the nature of the work is such that a majority of it becomes DME or becomes development work. And really, when we begin to look at the nature of that budget and the nature of that spend analysis, we begin to see that we have not only greater flexibility where O&M is concerned, but the opportunity to prioritize and reprioritize that spend to get the best out of the agency. So it's on both sides. One is looking at ways to improve the existing expenditures and to try to control those as much as we can. And the second is to look at the classification of expenditures to determine whether we in fact are using the right classifications and therefore placing the right priorities against those initiatives.
Okay, Kirit, how are you addressing your O&M, and is anything helping around shared services or X as a service to help alleviate some of that?
Absolutely. I think Jim hit the nail on the head when he said is when you peel the onion of the O&M budgets, the way they used to be done, and now that we are forced to look at it differently, is that under O&M there was lots of DME work going on, and it still is, which is development, modernization, enhancements. Wait a minute. That's not O&M. And you are doing lots of that on your old legacy systems. Okay? Now, the question here to be asked is, okay, do you really have to? But under that O&M budget is how then there is another aspect, which is the contractual aspects and how it's being worked. Again, working with acquisitions, trying to slice and dice that O&M budget and make it more transparent. And when you may start making it more transparent, you start seeing other aspects of that O&M budget. When we say 70 or 80% is O&M, is it really true? And that's really the issue. The other aspect, the way we are looking at it, again, as I said, under the strategic plan, we are looking at the enterprise architecture roadmap and tying that back into the CIPIC, the capital planning investment control. Right? So now looking down the road, we're going to say, okay, here it is and how it is. An enterprise architecture framework, the Federal Enterprise Architecture Framework, basically talks about plan, invest, and operate. Right? Plan, invest, and operate. So the issue is going to be now that under the enterprise architecture, when we start really building a true enterprise architecture, which is really ever shifting, remember, because the technologies are changing. The issue is going to be where are we going to start seeing duplications? Where are we going to start seeing across our enterprise? Again, looking at an enterprise view of it rather than we were looking at it from each of the components up. Now look from top down, and you're going to start seeing how you really can manage true O&M budget versus the way we kind of say O&M is structured today. That's really the legacy aspects of it and how we have operated all along.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so from an S&T point of view, we actually have several initiatives that we're looking at to try and reduce the O&M cost. I mentioned the network change in mindset, if you will, so that we really do away with our internal network. We're also looking at the endpoints and trying to consolidate on a standard image, let's say. So instead of going with, like what Jim said about providing flexibility at the endpoints with different platforms, we basically abstracted the platform and made it basically the user UI, and then have a standard image that we run in a container in that platform, or in the UI. So if you want to run a Mac, great, you're running a virtual machine of a Windows box. And then we have all of our legacy software. We have our standard image. We know how to manage it. It still goes through the trusted internet connection. It still gets managed through the VPN with all the same policies. So in that way, we're standardizing the image. We're providing flexibility to the users, and then, in theory, lowering the costs on the network.
I'm going to bounce back to security one more time for you, Ed. How do you see DHS's role play out in supporting all government around security? Now you're looking at a continuous monitoring type of offerings, and how do you envision that rolling out for the agencies?
Yeah, so for several years, we've had an entire portfolio on internet measurements and attack modeling. And the majority of the early work was basically visualization. So we have analysts that look at, tens, if not hundreds of millions of transactions a day, that they're looking to try and figure out where the anomalies are. What's the low and slow data exfiltration path that people are using on malware or bots? And that's a huge challenge. We've got some visualization technologies that are starting to pull that out. We've got some anomaly detection systems that are getting much better at that. So from a network point of view, we're getting to the point where we have situational awareness. We also have several products that were being developed to look at managing of traffic. So, if you can put in an IP filter at at line speed at 40 gigs, so that at your gateway of your enterprise, if you have traffic that's coming out of your enterprise, it's not an IP block that you own, why would you pass it? Clearly that's malicious traffic. It doesn't belong in your network, so why are you passing it through? Just drop it on the floor. Don't even let it go out. And on the same way on the incoming, you've got certain partners that you're going to be working with. Let that through. If you've got countries or enterprises that you're not ever going to be talking with, you can drop that out. From the network traffic, there's options that we're looking at right now. The bigger issue that we have significant effort being put into is software quality assurance. You could argue that the root of pretty much all the bad things that happen on the internet is software, taking out the user, and that's a huge issue. A lot of the malware authors have pretty much all of the suites of antivirus, and they're checking their malware as they go and they build it. We don't have the equivalent on creating software. We're developing that right now with some of our research infrastructure on software quality assurance. We have the software assurance marketplace, which is intended to take all of the software quality assurance tools so that you can basically blast your code to it and see where it falls out, because no tool is great. Is great at everything. So if you have independent measurements, you actually get a better picture of where your vulnerabilities are. So covering again the people, the infrastructure, and the systems. I think we've got efforts in all of that to protect the networks at large.
For Jim and Kirit, what do you want or what do you see as DHS's help or role in supporting you around security?
I think they play a tremendous role in terms of how they help us. I think one of the big parts DHS is playing from a security standpoint is they are setting up this whole NICE program for the training aspects of this. This is the soft side of it, how are we going to train our security personnel?
NICE is the National Initiative of Cybersecurity Education.
I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but that has been developed between NIST and DHS, where the NIST has set the standards and everything else, and then DHS really has taken the role of really this training the IT security personnel within the federal government, right? And I think they are moving very aggressively in that aspect. So the issue here is, and another example of is that recently at our headquarters building, we implemented a wireless enabled building. And when we did that first thing, I went to Rod Turk, my CISO, and says, hey, bring DHS in here. So we brought them in. He says, guys, go at it. Hack it. See what happens. And pleasant surprise, we got a reasonably robust report back with a few anomalies or some gaps that they said you might want to address, okay, as optional. So we rely really in that collaborative aspect. That's why I said one of the things I said in our guiding principles as we move along is these collaborative aspects of it, right? And how we're going to learn and lean on each other and not have to reinvent the wheel if somebody else has already really done something. And I tell you, you'd be surprised across agencies, you'll find somebody or the other has done something fantastic. And how do we go about it? We talk about telework, for example, our Patent and Trademark Office. Our patent and trademark approvers are spread all over the country. They're one of the most robust telework programs and always have had it. How do we leverage something like that across all of commerce or maybe across federal agencies, really? So from a security standpoint, really we rely and get a reasonably good service really from DHS.
Can you comment, Jim?
And I would echo that as well. I think we're looking to DHS for leadership and helping us bring together a number of these initiatives that we have so that as an agency we can implement them effectively and we can gain from the benefits and from, frankly, the experience that other agencies are having. So I would agree with that completely. And I think we're seeing the outproduct of that in a lot of recent initiatives that have come out. I think the push towards sensor-based analysis, the continuous monitoring analysis, all are pushing us in the right direction. And I think that we're now beginning to look at a little bit more investigative and kind of preemptive work, and that as well is helping set the stage for this process.
Actually,
Fundamentally, we've come to the conclusion that we can't absolutely prevent intrusion. We've just faced that reality. So we are trying to find the right risk balance that we can maintain as an agency that will protect us from impact as much as we can, and that will concentrate, frankly, on the departure of data from the agency as opposed to trying to prevent people coming in the front door. So we're trying to put together, in concert with DHS and NIST and others, a risk-based set of tools that will concentrate on analyzing behavior associated with various individuals in the organization and, frankly, over time, the entire organization, so that as these data flows change, we can react, and we can react very effectively. Most recent case of that would be a case that DOE experienced where they lost a set of highly encrypted and highly compressed data, but their tools were capable of defining the fact that this was an anomalous set of behaviors and that they were able to pinpoint that and stop that behavior before it exited the agency. So it's that type of approach that we think long-term is probably going to be best.
Good. I'm going to ask a question, and then I want to open it up to the audience here, so get prepared for that one. Acquisition, with the SIs in the audience here, and if you're looking at cloud and data center and security and mobility, shared services, access to service, give us some insight as to what they should see from an acquisition perspective as we move forward here. Jim, you want to go first on that?
I think it's, I would say small business, small business, small business. You know, the reality of federal procurement at the moment is that we are small business focused. That doesn't mean every procurement, and it certainly doesn't mean every activity, but that the majority of procurements will be focused in that space. That's going to put a considerable stress in the integration community, and it's going to cause a lot of need to partner. I think it also creates stress, quite honestly, from an agency standpoint, because frequently we don't have a rich history associated with individual businesses that we might be pursuing as components of our solution. So we're relying on the integration, the successful partnership of various business enterprises to provide that solution to us. But I think that is one area that we're going to see a lot of push on over the next few years. And I think the second area that I would suggest is probably in the area of less full and complete solutions and more, I would say, partial solutions or reduced scope solutions. I think as agencies try to move into this space, we're seeing that now in the commodity space. You're seeing a lot of move towards email. Initially, they were very tepid moves, and now you're seeing agencies going wholeheartedly, as Karen had indicated, that they're willing to make that jump. I think we're seeing it as well in the full outsourcing space right now, where we're willing to make that jump, but it's going to take a little bit of experience. So it's starting with efforts to try to subset the work in such a way that we can make forays into the cloud. But I think over time, I expect that to grow into the more complex and, frankly, better services that agencies need to provide that integrated solution.
I think I again go back to that collaborative aspect that I've been talking about. Currently, us from a technical standpoint and CIOs really cannot address some of the issues that technology is bringing to us, right? As we consolidate, as we go to the cloud, acquisition really has to be at the table, okay? Without acquisitions being at the table and including the financial and the HR, really, those have to be in concert and collaborative with us as we address how we go about it. I think Jim hit it. It's small business, small business, small business. That's the administration pushing in that direction, and also lots of our acquisition shops right now. That's what they'll tell you, right? Yes, it can be everything, but some of it is a reality, how we're going to address that going forward. But the main portion, I think, is us working very tightly with the acquisition shops as we go forward and try to structure our contracts and how efficiently can we do that, really. Because as we restructure this technology, we restructure this, we consolidate data centers, obviously there is a domino effect of that. It might be in the middle of a contract, and how do I see that contract through? How do we work together and there to bring the incumbent contractors on the table? And that can be done, as you all very well know, only through the contracting officer and the acquisition shops. So it's a for us, and we are working very closely with them right now in at least a commerce and talking to them as to, okay, here really, because they don't understand the technical aspects of it and what impact it has. So on our part is educating them a little bit and them understanding us as to why we want to do certain things certain way and how can they help us do that. And that might also bring the CFO being at the table and HR being at the table, because if there are government people and others being now repurposed, if you will, then that has to be part of the solution. And it can't be just done by us or by acquisitions by themselves. But all of us together will have to solve that issue as to how we go about it. But those are some definite challenges between acquisitions and us.
Ed, from a security perspective, how are you dealing with any acquisition to support that?
Yeah, so I'd agree with all this, as far as needing to change and, the emphasis on small business. I would also add that, from a tech development point of view, we have lots of really good components and not, shall we say, an integrated approach. So as we move things to the cloud and we have, X as a service coming in, it would be great if the next X worked with the last X, or, the IPS works with the infrastructure that we have. So it's one thing to have the greatest, widget. It's another thing to understand how that widget works within the scope of the entire environment. And I think that's where we really need to start educating, our acquisition folks to say, ask the next question. What are the out years? What's the longer-term tail costs that we're going to see when we integrate these technology solutions?
Any questions from the audience? Hold on one sec. Oh. I was pointing at her. It's okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Jim, you mentioned the focus on security, more on the departure of data. And Kirit and Ed, you both touched on a prime focus on security during the implementation of web hosting, cloud email, and other transitioning technologies. What security challenges do you find during data center consolidation, specifically on the secure disposition of the physical IT assets and the electronic media storing significant data involved?
Ed, do you want to start that?
If I'm understanding correctly, so clearly, as you consolidate your data, you're becoming a target. So there's lots of effort that's going to be put into people wanting that information, basically trying to get it. But that also is an opportunity. So as you shrink your perimeter, you can put your own resources in focusing on that. So you can make sure that your web servers, let's say, are configured correctly, so you don't have the possibility for SQL injection or various codes that or attacks that have been known but just haven't been patched because of whatever, lack of resources, lack of time, whatever. So you can focus your efforts on those things and make sure that what you have is as good as you possibly can, as opposed to saying that we've got 46 we need to manage somehow and we'll get to it when we can. So I think consolidating the data centers, consolidating the effort, even though you're putting a target on your back, you can start to manage that a little better. Now, the physical security, clearly that's an issue. Redundancy is going to be key. So if your drives go down, you want to make sure that you've got your backups and that. But that's self-contained within your data center or redundant elsewhere. For disaster recovery. So I'm not sure if I got to the heart of your question, but
I think that one of the other things that Ed brought up is as we look at the transitions. I mean, we're at the early stages where mostly what we're doing is acquiring cloud solutions. But as we look at transitioning from one service provider to another, what Ed pointed out before is the issue of cloud forensics and the ability to tell whether we have adequately pulled all of our data, all of our PII, and if we begin to put anything beyond moderate data out on the cloud, that we've gotten all that secure data back. And that is somewhat in conflict right now with the broader potential of industry to essentially distribute data dynamically across the board. I mean, how do we track that data as it makes its move, first of all, within the service provider's environment, and then potentially across service provider facilities? So this is a fairly significant problem, although, fortunately we're not at that phase of the process quite yet, where there's a lot of data out there that really needs to be validated. But at some point in time, somebody's going to ask, how are you sure that you got it all off of provider X now that you're putting it on provider Y? And that becomes a big challenge. And I think he correctly highlighted that as one of the key challenges. One of the fears that we have, although, again, at this stage of the game, not a big fear, but it's one of the long-term fears we have as we begin to transition from providers to another.
And actually, with the transition from provider to provider and the fast reprovisioning, what's provider X's policy on cleaning their disk space? How do you know that when you go to provider Y, you're not going over somebody else's disk space that they had and it wasn't cleaned properly, and you actually have access to data that wasn't yours, or vice versa, somebody has access to yours if they didn't clean it off correctly?
I have two. Is it on?
I don't know.
I have two questions which is common among all three agencies, and one is specific to DHS. The common question, all of you three gentlemen talked about that you are going to use the email with the public cloud. And I know there is training, being a security person myself, training policies, they are great. They do it refresher on an annual basis. However, that doesn't mean that the staff really, after check-marking those questions on an annual basis, they are really complying with it. So how do you detect that when you're using the email? Who is attaching which file to the email through the public cloud? That's the first question. Should I wait for the answer and ask the second one?
I can go. We are running pilots right now where we are scanning emails, not to see what's there, but the content. And if there is any personally identifiable information, we sequester that email and go to the owner of the email and say, hey, your email has been sequestered because we are seeing something in there that shouldn't be going out, for example, right? So, I mean, that's one example, is how we are going ahead. I'm
You
sure
are giving,
DHS is.
Kirit, you are giving all the answers is very general. My question is very specific. How you are going to do that? I hear what you are saying. That is like rephrasing a policy or a procedure. But my question is, how do you do? What tool do you use to detect
I'm not gonna-
what is on the email?
I'm not saying it's a policy. We are implemented that in a pilot basis right now. Is
Okay.
what I'm saying. It's not a policy.
Okay.
We are doing that, and we are sequestering these emails. And I tell you what, the biggest culprits we find are the very ones who shouldn't be doing it. We are finding it from legal and HR. So we are not. This is not a policy. It is on a pilot being implemented. But when we do this, there is a legal and other aspects to it that we have to be careful about. That's why we are piloting.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about that, it's not as simple as it sounds that I can do that. Then our legal and others have to come into play. So that's why we are piloting. So we're going to flesh out and say, okay, what are we seeing? What policies and other things are going to be needed to make sure we are not crossing the legal boundaries here?
Okay. Any other gentleman has the answer?
I
how
mean,
you are
it is a
doing
balance, as
it is.
Kirit mentioned. I mean, part of the problem we have is we have a public disclosure obligation, and we have to be careful that we're not curtailing that in the process of constraining the traffic that comes out on email. We're doing very similar types of things. We're doing pilots, but I can't say that we've really settled on a solution. I don't know that we have, and I certainly know that we haven't settled on a cloud solution where that's concerned. There are options out there, but we're just still in the trial phase of most of this activity, so we don't have much in that space.
Yeah, so our email as a service is not public cloud, and we do have our own mail scrubbers that we scrub with now. So, I mean,
I'm familiar with what DHS does.
okay.
Very detailed into it. The second question, everybody talks about acquisition, a small business. There is a very fine line, and I know that when we go through acquisition, all agencies also, because of the budget situation, they look at the lower price, and of course a small business has less overhead, so it would fit that. But there should be a balance between the quality of service that you get in acquisition and the small business and the lower cost. What's the strategy to deal with that?
Well, it's a little above our pay grade, I think. This is a policy that the administration has pushed. The intention is to expand, obviously, the opportunities for small business to participate in this process. I think that certainly at our agency we're relying on our ability to articulate the kind of solution that we're looking for, and if the procurement process works the way we believe it should, then that should be a leveling approach, at least as far as only selecting those businesses, small or large, that can play in that space and that can provide the kind of solution we're looking for. So that's the way we're approaching it.
Yeah, so I mean, we address it with small business concerns, on a per proposal basis, let's say. So if we get something from a large business, do they have opportunities for small businesses?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because a lot of the good ideas are really coming from the small businesses that eventually then get into the larger systems integrators through various means. So we have several programs that are meant to kind of bring the small businesses with the larger businesses as well, so that we can have that interaction, so that we do get the non-traditional partners, if you will, the smaller businesses that haven't dealt with the government but have great ideas. So I think one of the programs is Mentor Protege. So yeah.
And my last question is about SLA, which we talked a great deal about it. I'm very active with NIST and cloud computing since 2006. That's one of my side jobs, which I don't get paid for it, but it's a passion to heart. With regard to FedRAM and GSA providing the cloud, and if an agency is using GSA-provided cloud, which is certified and it goes through the whole 9 line, but they are also having a service that is directly they are acquiring, legally, how do you map the SLA for GSA with the other cloud provider? because in the recent NIST workshop on a cloud computing, big data, and data center, there was a gentleman from X agency, which we don't name, was very frustrated, and he was expressing that he has lost more than $1 million using GSA and other service provider, but legally, apparently, there is no concrete agreement who is ultimately responsible when an incident happens. And his agency was involved with an incident, and he would go to GSA, wouldn't get any result. It would go to the other provider. They would pass it because GSA is the main provider. So what is the strategy to deal with this type of loss in the future?
I'm not sure if there is a strategy, actually, but, I mean, SLAs are very important. You know, you really need to read them. I mean, I click through them quite often when I'm at home and just, yeah, okay, I agree. You know, but when we start talking about cloud services, you know, the SLA is going to be huge because you might have an increase in transport costs if you're doing all your compute locally, you know, versus in the cloud where it potentially should be. So, you know, I think you really need to pay attention to that. I don't know if there's a common strategy on how to deal with it, though.
No, I don't think there is a common
There
strategy.
isn't.
Every agency's
Yeah.
facing that challenge, but it's not much different than the challenge we face today with multiple contract providers. I mean, we may have a provider who builds the system, another provider that's operating the system. When an incident occurs, who's to say necessarily where that error exists? And in fact, you know, without an extensive forensics process, we probably couldn't even find where the error existed. Yet we've got to manage that across the board. So some of this is really I would suggest, is an industry challenge as well. It's not just a government challenge. Clearly, the financial side is a government challenge, but there's an industry challenge to find patterns of working together and potentially legal agreements between providers that are external to even the government's activities that may provide some options that the government hasn't provided for. So I just give that as an alternative.
Yes, sir.
I was just curious on the savings that you guys realized from data center consolidation. I think DHS might be able to speak to this pretty well, but how quickly do you realize those savings? Where do they specifically come from? Is that energy consumption, facility usage, actually jobs that people had maybe as administrators in the past? Talk a little bit about how quickly you can realize those savings and whether you publish those as metrics. I think I've seen DOD say they're going to save like $2 billion, but I haven't seen any other agencies really say that. And some guy from the GAO was telling me that a lot of agencies have been hesitant to provide that type of data. So maybe all three of you could possibly speak to that. Certainly DHS, because you guys have been very successful at that so far.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not able to speak to that because I'm not in the CIO shop. But I don't imagine that the cost would be realized very quickly. You know, I think it's just something that over time you're going to see because there is going to be an increase in cost from just standing up the infrastructure. You know, then over time you might see the benefits of reduced cost or reduced energy and et cetera. But yeah, I don't have access to those numbers.
I personally think if you're looking at metrics right away, it's very difficult to do because it's a CapEx, OpEx issue, which is the capital expenditure, which is the operational expenditure, okay? Because if I'm massively virtualizing, I have a cost that I'm putting in to do that before I start realizing some savings as you move along. Same thing with thin provisioning, tiered storage, for example, okay? All that kind of stuff we are implementing right now. So the issue lies is where is my capital expenditure, where is my operational expenditure, and how does that eventually settle down before you can produce metrics. You see what I'm saying, right? So the issue isn't that if somebody's looking for metrics right away that we can clearly state, here is really expense. I can do that, but that's not going to be real savings per se.
Could you explain that out before you decide to consolidate certain ones on, well, I think I'll save this much money if I do this. Is that all hard numbers, or do you guys sort of...
Well, it's like I said, it's a fuzzy between the CapEx and OpEx, is what I'm trying to say. Where is my capital investment coming from, and where is my operational expense coming from? You see what I'm saying? There is an intersection between the two somewhere, okay? So that's wherein lies our challenge right now until, like I said, we have some volume that we have accomplished. We are at a very early stage, as Jim just said, in doing some of these things and architecting and saying how we're going to go, right? Because the server technology within the rack, like I said, is growing so fast. So does my footprint even shrink? So the power savings and stuff might be there as a result of that. You see what I'm saying, right? Because you are now vertically putting more into a rack than you used just a year ago. How the server technology is moving that fast is what I'm trying to say. So what is happening here is that until we settle down with that, like I said, virtual, as Gartner says, the virtual machine ratio is doubling every 18 months. Right? So it's all happening as we go along, and it's changing so fast. So on one end, I might be putting new technology servers in. I'm virtualizing, so there is a number of angles we are coming from.
I think that what you're seeing is probably most agencies leading with the relatively easy to accommodate costs. So you might see some personnel changes, you might see some contract adjustments, you might see some savings relative to power and other capabilities. But keep in mind that one of the structural challenges in the government is the long tail associated with our particularly real estate investments. So freeing up a data center doesn't necessarily mean it's back on the market tomorrow. There are idiosyncrasies associated with GSAs, releasing space to GSA then taking it to market. So a lot of the major savings that might come from that will occur in those areas. And the second piece of it that you see is a kind of softer piece, and that is a reallocation of space. So data centers become offices. They become meeting spaces. They become other areas. So while the agency itself has released that data center, it doesn't necessarily translate into a freed up space. It's not something you can get rid of, and you may just reallocate it or repurpose it down the line.
Any more?
Yeah. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on the notion of when you migrate applications to a cloud environment, that it actually could reduce the reliance of that particular agency or the buying entity on the service provider if, because I would think that by defining the service requirements for that infrastructure provider, whatever it might be, availability, things like that, provisioning timeframes, other things, and defining the requirements of your application, it actually enables or increases business agility for moving from one provider to another as time evolves. And just wanted to hear your perspectives on that.
Well, I know that in our analysis, that's one of the challenges that we're running into. We're having, while we want to give industry the freedom to come back with a solution for us, one of our own challenges is knowing what we know. We have an allocation of applications across a set of servers. We can tell the server structure. We can tell to a degree how much capacity it's using and the like, but it's difficult for us to allocate the storage or to understand if we took this into a virtual space, what would the impacts be. So I have noted, at least in our own research, that a lot of agencies have come out with basically, I used to call it when I was an integrator task zero, but essentially an initiating task where you're asking the provider to come and give you a profile of your environment, to tell you, all right, by application or by major component, how that might best fit, and what type of what type of resources would be consumed by that application. Because ultimately, it's all about defining a baseline. Once you know what the baseline is, at that point in time, you can make calculated choices relative to increasing the baseline or knowing where growth is. And that actually helps both parties, the integrator as well as the government. I mean, frankly, I see from an integrator's perspective, one of the hardest things to manage would be the slippage. If government comes in and says, all right, look, you're going to support application X, and the contract hasn't been sufficiently clear about the components of application X, you could easily end up supporting something that is consuming a higher number of assets in your space, and not getting paid for it. Similarly, in the government, we need to know when we're tripping over that limit so that we're not asking you without some intelligent feedback to support something that is growing far faster than perhaps either one of us had anticipated. So it's that combination that we have to work on to find a way to communicate back and forth the growth curve that we see these applications taking. And as they become virtualized, that becomes even harder because now these things are being thrown on various types of equipment. They're being stacked on a regular basis to maximize the benefit that you're able to provide out of that equipment. And we are not, that is not visible to us. So we need help in understanding that and help having that kind of dialogue about growth and about controlling growth, et cetera.
I think what Jim said at the end is the issue. Are you going to be transparent to us? I don't think so. Okay, and that's the issue. How you're running a business, and your model is the most efficiencies are the equipment that you have. Now, are we going to have the transparency into that as to where the shared racks are, where shared servers are, how they're virtualized, how is this all working, and what the metrics are? And I have a very good example. I'm not going to name the companies. I'm not going to name any of that. That there is a managed contract sitting there, and today that company claims it's proprietary information. I say, you must be kidding me. But that's what they're claiming right now, and we have no insights whatsoever. Even when a performance issue comes about, they're pointing fingers and saying, where is it? Because if we don't have that insight into, and I was just talking earlier, if the rack vertical is growing, and you're going to do that as much as possible, it does create the backbone of that and how the data is flowing through that and where are the bottlenecks or not, how does the performance suffer or not, and how do we, and that's going to be a difficult, we are all in early stages, but the industry has to understand that they should be prepared to be a little transparent to us. And that's where the comfort zone is going to come from the government side.
Yeah, I mean, it is a balance because, I mean, industry is looking for the, you're stuck with my solution, you can't go anywhere else. And government's looking for the lack of, reliance, let's say, so I can move to other places. So FedRAMP is a great example of, here's our baseline. We have, 5 or 6 sets of auditing that we have to, you have to meet to be approved for FedRAMP. So in theory, if you have the right SLA, you can then move from one provider to the next once we have that, provider list actually starting to fill out beyond 2 that it is now. But yeah, I mean, it is a balance and it's a struggle.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I came in a little bit late, so I apologize if this was covered in earlier comments, but there wasn't a whole lot of talk today about managing the mission-critical power infrastructure inside the data center. And that's, kind of the other half of the challenge, managing the IT systems. The other is making sure that there's green lights on all the boxes and everything's running. And it's also, better management of the mission-critical power systems, I think, will help achieve a lot of the FDCCI goals in terms of energy reduction and reduction of carbon footprint and such. So I was just wondering, at any of your 3 agencies, are the agencies themselves managing the mission-critical facilities, or is that outsourced to third parties? And I think I might know the answer for like the big DHS facility down south, but I was just curious to understand, is that being managed inside any of the agencies, or is that outsourced to third-party vendors?
Ours is a combination right now, the way it is, okay? But looking forward, we are definitely looking at the green aspects of it, as you just said. In addition to that, the redundancies and not only in the power and the air conditioning and the chilling, but also in terms of the telecommunications, okay? And how are we going to address that and how we go forward? Definitely is something that is in the forefront as we are looking at how we go about this data center consolidation and how we do that. So that definitely is. Like I said, some of it is self-evolving. In fact, there is a nice white paper that Gartner has, and they're talking about if you have a X number of square foot of data center currently, how it's going to become more and more efficient and how the power usage is going to be going further than it does today. But that also creates the issue about the redundancies within the data centers of your PDU distributions and how redundant are they? Are you going to the flywheel kind of a deal, or going to traditional UPSs? And so yes, I mean, but that requires huge investments, as we all know, right? Again, a CapEx and OpEx issue in terms of how government can move forward. We don't have huge amounts of budget available to us to go and invest, in that kind of technologies from a physical data center aspects, if that's what you're asking, when it comes to power and air conditioning and the greening aspects as a result of an efficient and redundant data centers. But again, we're going to looking at the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 kind of facilities. Every time we might not need one. So how do we segment those, right? And pay. Why do we want to pay for a high-tiered facility when we don't really need for that particular area, that we might need a lower? Now, some of these things, same thing with the tiered data center availability versus tiered SLAs is also another aspect we are looking at.
Yeah, from our vantage point, we're looking to the cloud right now as the primary vehicle to achieve some of those savings and green effects. Once we consolidate then within our own space, we will then reapply a lot of that experience to our own in-house data centers. The problem right now is we have too many of them. It is not clear which one will retain, and the investment as well as the analysis is just going to have to hold until we reach that point. So.
Yeah, I have no idea how the power is being run out of DC1 and DC2, so yeah.
Just plugs in.
Yeah.
Is that it? Very good. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it. Give our panelists a round of applause.